Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. Pompeii Mummy. In the ruined city of Pompeii, Italy, archaeologists have uncovered a mysterious tomb and a mummified corpse. Researchers with the University of Valencia in Spain made the incredible find, but since then, it's been boggling scientists because the customs of the time dictated that the bodies of adults were to be cremated, not buried, and certainly not mummified. This is now the only tomb uncovered in Pompeii that has a burial chamber, and because of how well preserved the city of Pompeii is, thanks to the eruption that blanketed the city in ash, the tomb revealed quite a bit about the dead man inside of it. Here's what archaeologists have found out so far. The mummy belongs to a man named Marcus Venerius Secundio. His tomb was constructed probably within the decade before the city was destroyed. The dead man was once a public slave turned guardian of the local temple of Venus. He managed to achieve a high economic status upon being freed, and he even found himself a wife, who researchers discovered inside the tomb. They found a glass container with the ash remains of a woman who went by the name Novia Amabilis. But then why was this man not cremated? Perhaps he had his own customs from his past. The only thing archaeologists can come up with is that he had a fascination with Greek culture, because in Greece at the time, burials were preferred over cremations. Number 9. Medieval Castle. At Soulton Hall in the United Kingdom, researchers have discovered the sandstone walls of a medieval castle. They've also found a few trinkets that may have been left behind by religious pilgrims visiting the site. For years, the owners of Soulton Hall, an Elizabethan estate, were wondering what the mysterious dirt mounds were in their backyard. The owners of the estate called in archaeologists, who then uncovered evidence of human habitation going back thousands of years, surprising the landowners. Excavations show that a huge castle once stood on the grounds. The castle dates back to around the 13th century, with researchers from Cardiff University uncovering sandstone walls and pieces of timber, which they believe may have been part of a moat that encircled the small castle fortress. The castle stood on the road to the ancient village of Wem, perhaps protecting the small village from troublemakers. Soulton Hall was built in the 1600s, meaning the estate must have gone up just a few years after the castle was destroyed, or even while it still stood. The whole area has been occupied by some of the wealthiest members of English society ever since 1086. But its history is even richer than that. Previous excavations uncovered Neolithic flint from 5,500 years ago, meaning the grounds of Soulton Hall have a history that goes back at least 7,500 years. Number 8. Rock of the Fairies. The ancient dolmen discovered in France is the largest in the entire world. If you're wondering what a dolmen is, these structures are basically the oldest graves found throughout much of Europe. Many of them go back at least 5,000 years, just like this one. They were used as burial structures with someone, researchers don't usually know who, buried beneath. This one is an incredible ancient specimen, a kind of passage tomb made of 32 stones acting as the walls and 9 giant stones as the roof slabs. This structure itself is a giant compared to most of the dolmens found around the world, measuring 60 feet long and at its highest point is roughly 12 feet high. The heaviest stone used to build the monument weighs roughly 40 tons. But how did ancient people manage to lift such heavy stones? This particular dolmen found in France comes from between 4,500 and 5,000 years ago during the late Neolithic period, and yet no excavations have been made at the site. Nothing has been found except for the dolmen's huge stones. There could be bodies underneath, priceless artifacts, who knows what else? Local legend says the site was built by fairies overnight to prove that they existed, and that if a pair of lovers comes to the site and counts the same number of stones, they will be happy forever. Back in the day, the passage grave would have been covered by a pile of stones called a cairn, so it would have even been much larger thousands of years ago. As of now, nobody knows who built the dolmen, how many people are buried under the soil, or why the ancient people went through such great lengths to make it in the first place. Number 7. Ancient Roman eggs. Archaeologists recently cracked open some ancient eggs that date back to the Roman occupation of Great Britain. It happened when they were excavating a settlement in central England that was founded 1,700 years ago. They got a nose full of history when they accidentally broke open the eggs that had been sitting there for nearly 2,000 years. The eggs came from chickens, and they were left behind in an ancient community along an old Roman road. The eggs were inside of a pit, which is how they managed to stay preserved for so long buried in the soil. Other artifacts found with the eggs include a wooden basket, a pair of leather shoes, and some tools. As the archaeologists were trying to retrieve the artifacts, they accidentally cracked open 2 of the eggs, which released a potent rotten egg smell that scared them right out of the pit. That's a 2,000-year-old smell. Can you imagine? Only a single egg managed to be taken out intact, and it's now being celebrated as the only complete Roman egg to ever be recovered from Britain. The dig project manager, Stuart Foreman, called it an incredible find. He and his colleagues believe the pit was originally used for malting grain, which was then used in beer. But by the end of the 3rd century, the pit had turned into a kind of wishing well where the residents tossed things in as offerings to the gods, like eggs and coins, and apparently their leather shoes. Number 6. The cult of the rain god. Tlaloc is the oldest and mightiest of the Mesoamerican gods. The name translates to something like he who makes things sprout, or the nectar of the earth. Tlaloc represents the essence of rain and thunder, with the ancient Aztecs beseeching him to strengthen the clouds and send rain to grow their crops. He was one of the most important and formidable gods of the Aztec Empire. Not only did they call on him for rain and water, but he was also important for fertility. Effigies and images of the rain god have been found all throughout Teotihuacan in figurines and carvings, though the origin of Tlaloc goes back much further, to the Olmec culture. They worshipped a similar god named Anue, who may have been the inspiration for Tlaloc, who came later. Tlaloc is quite scary in Aztec culture. He is shown wearing a strange mask with large round eyes and long fangs. Every culture in Mesoamerica worshipped Tlaloc. They just did it under different names. For the Zapotec culture from what is now modern Oaxaca in Mexico, he was called Pitao. To the Mayans, he was known as Chac. In archaeology, there is no place more sacred to the old worshippers of Tlaloc than the Templo Mayor at Tenochtitlan, the ancient capital of the Aztecs. Archaeologists have uncovered proof of rituals and other ceremonies here dedicated to the rain god. Tlaloc had his own temple at the top of the pyramid next to a temple dedicated to the warlord god Huitzilopochtli, and both of them were very thirsty for blood and required sacrifice. And now for number 5. But first, want to give a big shout out to Josie Bunny and Iman Guha, who's a new subscriber. Welcome, and thanks so much for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. Number 5. The Cochno Stone. This strange and mysterious stone panel, known as the Cochno Stone, was unearthed in Clydebank, the United Kingdom, after 50 years buried under the dirt. The stone itself dates back to the year 3000 BC, but it was buried in 1965 after archaeologists stumbled upon it and didn't know how to keep it safe. Archaeologists couldn't physically remove the stone because of its size. It measures about 24 feet by 39 feet. That's about as long as a semi-trailer and twice as tall as a giraffe. So they took some pictures and then buried it to protect it from the weather and vandals. This thing is huge, one of the greatest examples of Neolithic markings anywhere in Europe. This stone is covered in bizarre symbols and rings, though they don't tell researchers much about the stone's history because no one really understands what these things mean. Nobody knows who made it 5,000 years ago or what its purpose was. The only reason it was dug up now is that archaeologists wanted to use new 3D imaging technology to digitally record its surface and try to better understand this mysterious artifact. Dr. Kenny Brophy from Glasgow University says the Cochno Stone is the biggest Neolithic art panel in Europe, which is wild because it's sitting in the middle of a suburb. Unfortunately, modern graffiti was found on its surface, suggesting that even though it was buried, vandals still managed to get to it. Number 4. The Great Flood. Researcher Ronnie Gallagher believes he has solved one of the biggest questions in ancient Egyptian history. For decades, historians have been trying to figure out why the original settlers in Egypt made their great civilization in the Nile Valley and where they originally came from. Ronnie says it's because of a catastrophic flood that doused huge parts of Eurasia and forced people to migrate to places of safety like the Nile Valley. This theory is backed up by ancient Egyptian texts that describe some of the earliest burial rituals in the country as taking dead people back to their ancestral homelands. What's even more shocking is that Ronnie believes the flood may have been similar to the biblical flood in which Noah built his great ark. If Ronnie's research is to be believed, the ancestral homeland of the Egyptians is actually modern Azerbaijan. It's not that far away, so it's no surprise that after a great flood, the locals would have strayed into Egypt almost 8,000 years ago. To back up this theory, mollusks and small marine fossils have been found in the area that date back to 7750 BC. There was almost definitely a great flood, though this was way before the Bible was ever written. Then, after the Egyptians settled along the Nile, it took them just over 2,000 years to start building their pyramids. Number 3. Mysterious coins. A tour guide in Israel named Yotam Dahan was out camping with his family on a beach near the hamlet of Atlit when he stumbled upon an extraordinary archaeological discovery. It was a green clump of metal that turned out to be 13 pounds of ancient coins from 1,700 years ago. It was basically a cannonball made out of rusted old coins. After Dahan posted pictures of the shocking discovery online, the Israel Antiquities Authority got in touch with him. They sent a coin expert to determine how old and how valuable the coins truly were, because by law you have to report your finds in case they are deemed a national treasure. It turns out they were minted during the 4th century AD. Additionally, scraps of cloth left clinging to the clump of coins shows that they were probably packed in a bag. Somebody was walking around with 13 pounds of cash in a sack when something happened and they lost their treasure. What happened to the owner of the coins is anyone's guess. The area was used as a harbor where ships docked overnight in ancient times. It's possible that the cache of coins belonged to a ship and was meant to be used for trade when the bag somehow went overboard and was lost underwater. Throughout the next almost 2,000 years, the shifting tides gradually pushed the giant clump of coins onto the beach, where Dahan accidentally found them. Number 2. Christian inscription. Researchers believe they have discovered the earliest surviving Christian inscription in history, taken from a medieval tower in the suburbs of Rome. The inscription is written in Greek and dates back to the 2nd century AD. Back then, the Roman Empire was at its peak of power and influence. The only other written remains that have anything to do with Christianity from this period are fragments of old papyrus that quote part of the Gospels. The stone inscription only alludes to the beliefs of Christians at the time. Gregory Snyder from Davidson College in North Carolina says the inscription incorporates both Christian and pagan beliefs. The man who wrote the inscription is believed to have followed the teachings of Valentinus, one of the earliest preachers of Christianity who was ultimately declared a heretic by Rome. He taught that nothing in the physical world mattered, so nothing that you did in life mattered once you died. It only mattered what you believed in. His teachings were probably inspired both by Christ and Plato. It was a very unique mashup, and one of the earliest forms of Christianity widely practiced. In any case, this is the earliest stone inscription that directly mentions the Father and the Son, meaning God and Jesus. Who exactly wrote it or why, that's a mystery that will probably never be solved. Number 1. Hugging skeletons. Archaeologists recently exhumed 2 skeletons from an ancient burial site in China who were entombed hugging each other. When the archaeologists dug up their grave, they found them still locked in a powerful embrace that lasted far beyond death. One skeleton is of a man, the other is of a woman. We don't know whether they were best friends or lovers, but we do know that they died about 1,500 years ago. The woman was discovered with a plain silver ring on her finger, so in all likelihood, the couple was married. According to the researchers involved with the discovery, the couple was buried during the Northern Wei dynasty between 386 and 534. This was a very turbulent time for society since Buddhism was rapidly spreading through China. The division of beliefs was causing problems for people while changing the way they viewed life after death. This joint burial could be proof of an emerging importance in everlasting love. Chun Zhang, associate professor with Xiamen University, called it a rare glimpse of the concepts of love, as well as life, death, and the afterlife in ancient China. As for the cause of death, it's pretty grim. Judging by an unhealed injury to the man's right arm, archaeologists say he probably died from the wound, and then his wife died shortly after to be with him in the afterlife. Either that, or they both died of a mysterious illness at the same time. Thanks for watching! If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe for more. See you next time. Bye!